Colorado is home to 13 units of the National Park System. In this video, we're going to cover 12 of them because I already covered the other one in the Utah episode. That includes 4 of the Big 63. Colorado is world-renowned as an outdoor lover's destination with big mountains, big parks, and wide open spaces. The Centennial State is also incredibly geographically diverse, and you'll find its parks spread throughout not only the mountains, but the Great Plains and even the desert Southwest. Colorado is home to some of the most popular national parks in the United States, but as is a recurring theme in this series, there are also parks here you've probably never heard of, exploring parts of American history that are often overlooked. This week, we're diving into the national parks of Colorado. Alright, I'm thinking we'll go alphabetical here, so let's start with Amache National Historic Site. Right off the bat, I'm throwing y'all a curveball because we're not starting in the mountains as you might expect for a state like Colorado, whose claim to fame is its mountains. Nearly half of Colorado is still considered to be in the Great Plains, and that is where Amache National Historic Site is located. This is one of 5 sites associated with the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II that is protected by the National Park Service. It is also the newest of those 5 added to the National Park System, having been established when President Biden signed the Amache National Historic Site Act in 2022. It officially became Colorado's newest national park site in 2024, when it was formally added to the national park system after all of the proper land acquisitions were completed. Of course, this site interprets a very dark period of American history. Officially known as the Grenada War Relocation Center, Amache saw more than 10,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of whom were citizens, incarcerated here between 1942 and 1945. At its peak in 1943, 7,310 people were detained here, which qualified Amache as the 10th most populous city in Colorado. As a new site, Amache is still kind of a park in progress. The site is home to both a reconstructed barracks and a guard tower, as well as a historically preserved recreational hall and water tower. There's also a cemetery and memorial on site as well, but most of the MPS presence for this park is actually located off-site at the nearby Amache Museum in Grenada, Colorado. Work is underway, though, to gradually develop a more robust MPS presence on site, complete with facilities and interpretive programming. And in fact, just this past summer, the Park Service started offering ranger-led tours at this site for the first time. Next up, we're still staying in the Great Plains and heading to Bent's Old Fort National Historic Site. This site protects the location of an old adobe fort built by William and Charles Bent along with their partner, Siren St. Vrain, which they established as a trading post during the time of America's westward expansion. Now, to understand the importance of this fort, you first have to understand the historical extent of U.S. territory at the time this fort was operating. Today, this fort is pretty much in the middle of nowhere, smack dab in the middle of U.S. territory, and it might not seem like it has that much strategic importance. But this fort was built in 1833, and at that time, the Arkansas River, on which this fort is located, was the boundary between the United States, via the land acquired under the Louisiana Purchase, and Mexico. As such, the fort served as an important frontier outpost for trading goods between white American settlers and trappers, Hispanic traders, and indigenous tribes, particularly the Cheyenne and Arapaho, who mostly dealt in buffalo hides. For much of its history, the fort was the only permanent white settlement on the Santa Fe Trail between Missouri and Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they weren't just trading physical goods here either. Bent's Old Fort's location meant it was not only a nexus for commercial goods, but a social and cultural connection as well. In its later years, the fort also became militarily important during the Mexican-American War, which started in 1846. Bent's Old Fort was then abandoned in 1849 and remained that way until 1960, when it was added to the National Park System. A reconstructed adobe fort was built in 1976 and opened to the public for the USA's bicentennial. All right, now we are finally moving into the mountains to Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park. Obviously, the eponymous canyon is the standout feature at this park, whose walls are so steep and so vertical and so sheer that only about 30 minutes of sunlight actually ever penetrates all the way to the deepest recesses of the canyon, each day. This fact has helped Black Canyon of the Gunnison earn the reputation as the park that never sees the sun. Now, the Black Canyon itself is 48 miles long, but the national park only protects about 14 of those miles. Still, in the 48 miles of the Black Canyon, the Gunnison River loses more elevation than the entire Mississippi River does over 1,500 miles. Through the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in particular, the Gunnison River drops 96 feet every single mile. At one point, the river drops 480 feet in 2 miles. This is one of the steepest river descents in the entire world. So that should give you an idea of how much elevation and how much sheer erosive power we're talking about with this river and with this park. With that much erosive power, the Gunnison River is able to absolutely chew through the hard, erosion-resistant metamorphic rock through which it flows, meaning the river just inevitably carves itself downward more and more rather than outward like you might see at a place like the Grand Canyon, because the rock is so much softer and easily eroded there. And yeah, that's really just the short version of the geology of Black Canyon and why this place is predicted as a national park. If you want to see the long version, I have an entire explainer on it. Next, we move to Colorado National Monument. Yes, it's just the same name as the state in which it's located. This national monument is located in western Colorado near the town of Grand Junction, and you could be forgiven for thinking that this monument looks like it almost belongs in Utah rather than Colorado. It's got striking canyons and red rock formations, and by this point, moving west across the state, you're starting to transition out of those mountainous alpine environments and into the high desert of the Colorado Plateau. This park is 20,500 acres of pure canyon country playground. Its standout feature is the Monument Canyon, which traverses the length of the park, and which is mostly paralleled by the scenic Rim Rock Drive. If you're an outdoor recreation person, chances are this park has something for you. Hiking, climbing, horseback riding, and road cycling. Actually, in the 80s, Colorado National Monument was part of the circuit for the Coors Classic Stage Race, which at the time was the 4th largest cycling race in the world and came to be known as America's National Tour. The section through the park was known as the Tour of the Moon because of its spectacular scenery. Also, in the early 20th century, there was a real push to protect this place as like a full-on national park, thanks to efforts by a man named John Otto, who helped develop an extensive trail network and make the canyons more accessible to humans. Obviously, that effort was never realized because Colorado National Monument never became Colorado National Park, but William Howard Taft made sure to protect the canyons anyway as a national monument through the Antiquities Act in 1911. Although the national park question still gets raised every now and again, most recently in 2014. Moving on, we'll actually head back to the Gunnison River to Curecanti National Recreation Area. I've talked a couple of different times about NRAs during this series before, and remember that there are basically 2 different types of national recreation areas in the national park system. Those that are centered around reservoirs and those that are centered around urban recreation. In the case of Curecanti, it falls into the former category, the reservoir category. This park is directly adjacent to Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, like their boundaries literally touch each other. The eastern boundary of BCG is the western boundary of Curecanti. Near that boundary, you'll find the Crystal Dam on the Gunnison River. Further downstream lies the Morrow Point Dam, and finally, further downstream than that still lies the Blue Mesa Dam. Each of these dams creates a reservoir of the same name along the Gunnison River, the Blue Mesa being the largest by far. As with all national recreation areas, Curecanti is, of course, focused on providing recreational opportunities for you, the visitors, mostly centered around like motor-powered boating. The Bureau of Reclamation manages the hydropower infrastructure in this park. From there, we'll move to Dinosaur National Monument. Now, I promised you guys back in the Utah episode that I would talk about dinosaur in this Colorado episode, so here we are. Now, with a name like Dinosaur National Monument, you would think there would be dinosaurs here, and you would be correct. Dinosaur National Monument was first protected in 1915 to preserve its excellent paleontological resources, aka dinosaurs. And ironically, even though I'm covering this park in the Colorado episode, the most famous dinosaur area in the park is actually in Utah. That would be the Quarry Exhibit Hall and the famous Wall of Bones, which contains thousands of dinosaur fossils and is entirely contained within a covered, climate-controlled facility. The design of this facility, which was built in the 1950s, was pretty controversial because it's not very parkitecture-y. It doesn't exactly blend in with the landscape. Now, as I mentioned, this area with all the dinosaur fossils was what was originally protected as Dinosaur National Monument back in 1915, but it was just 80 acres at that time. In 1938, the park was expanded to its current size of over 200,000 acres by FDR. This expanded version of the park is what brought it into Colorado territory and centered it on the confluence of the Green and Yampa rivers, an area known in particular for its scenic qualities. In the 1960s, this confluence, known as Echo Park, was the subject of a bitter controversy where the Bureau of Reclamation tried to build a dam here as part of its Colorado River storage project, which was fought off through a fierce campaign by environmentalists, only to see the compromised location in Glen Canyon chosen for a dam instead. I have a whole video about this. You might have seen it already. It's like my most popular video ever. Next, we move to Florissant Fossil Beds National Monument. According to the Park Service, this is one of the richest fossil deposits in the world, containing over 1,400 different plant and animal fossils. There are two main types of fossils found here. Both are very different from each other. The most visible ones, and the ones you will probably spend most of your time at the park looking at, are the massive fossilized redwood stumps. Yes, fossilized tree stumps of the tallest trees on Earth. The other type of fossil you'll find here, though, are of all the insects, spiders, leaves, seeds, cones, fish, etc., the smaller stuff. And the reason you see both of these types of fossils has to do with the environment they existed in when they were fossilized. It was much warmer and wetter in this area back then, and the climate would have been temperate to possibly even subtropical rather than the cold and dry climate that is typical of the area right now. Hence the redwoods. During a period of volcanic activity, a fast-moving volcanic debris flow called a lahar engulfed these redwoods and the surrounding landscape and buried them all under a large layer of volcanic ash, where they eventually fossilized. At least that's a very short version of a very complex series of events that took place over millions of years. Nevertheless, that fossilization that occurred as a result of that volcanic activity formed the basis of all of the paleontological resources on display at this park today. Moving south, we'll head to another Big 63 park in Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. Of course, this park is famous for its sand dunes, which are the tallest in all of North America. Some of these guys can top out over 700 feet tall of just pure sand. The tallest is Star Dune, standing at 750 feet. And there are 6 different types of sand dunes found in this park. Yes, there are different types of sand dunes, and they are formed according to different wind patterns and vegetation regimes and all sorts of stuff like that. The overall dune field itself is about 30 square miles or almost 20,000 acres of, again, just pure sand. Well, I mean, like, there's some other stuff in there too, but it's mainly just sand. I do have a whole video on how these dunes got to be so tall, explaining the geology of Great Sand Dunes National Park, but the long and short of it is there used to be a big lake here, then it dried up, left behind a bunch of sediment. That sediment became the source of all the sand, and the wind blew the sand into the nice bowl-shaped valley and started piling up, forming dunes. Now, you might have noticed I called Great Sand Dunes a national park and preserve. That's right, the dune field is the part of the park protected as a national park, but Great Sand Dunes also encompasses a good portion of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains along its eastern boundary. Those mountains are important to this entire ecosystem because they contain the headwaters of certain streams that eventually flow down to the dune field and help recycle sand back out into the dune field where it can be blown in again by the wind. The mountain portion of the park, however, is protected as a national preserve because seasonal hunting is allowed there still. This makes Great Sand Dunes one of only 2 lower 48 parks to carry a National Park and Preserve combo designation, along with New River Gorge. Alright, Colorado does have a small portion of Hovenweep National Monument, but I already talked about that park in the Utah episode, so you can go and check it out there, and we'll move on to Mesa Verde National Park. Now, Mesa Verde is a bit unique in that it was the first national park in the United States to quote-unquote protect the works of man. It was first protected back in 1906, and up until that point in national park history, national parks were mainly focused on protecting monumental scenery, places like Yellowstone, Yosemite, Sequoia, Mount Rainier. But Mesa Verde was all about protecting cultural and archaeological resources. In this case, over 5,000 different sites associated with the ancestral Puebloan peoples of the southwestern United States. The ancestral Puebloans ranged across most of what is today the Four Corners region of the United States, and many of their sites are still preserved in the hot, arid climate of the Southwest. Today, Mesa Verde is home to one of the largest and most well-preserved collections of these sites. Most famously, this includes 600 cliff dwellings spread across its over 15,000 acres of parkland. The largest of these is Cliff Palace, constructed and occupied around the turn of the 11th century AD. It contains 23 kivas, or ceremonial spaces, about 150 separate rooms, and could have held potentially about 100 people. It is thought to have been abandoned by about 1300 AD. As with many southwestern archaeological sites, the protection of Mesa Verde ultimately came about as a result of widespread looting and exploitation of the site's artifacts. In fact, the Antiquities Act was passed the very same year Mesa Verde was established, which enabled thousands of archaeological sites to be protected from exploitation. I have a whole video on the Antiquities Act if you're interested. Next, we move to the final of Colorado's big 63 national parks, the big guy, Rocky Mountain National Park. This is far and away Colorado's most popular national park, having seen nearly 4.2 million visitors last year. In fact, it was the 5th most visited national park in the entire United States last year, and is the only Colorado national park to regularly see over 1 million visitors annually. As the name implies, this park is meant to be the sort of prototypical park for Colorado's Rocky Mountain scenery. Yes, it only protects a small fraction of Colorado's overall mountain landscapes, coming in at about 265,000 acres, but if you come to Colorado looking to experience the Rocky Mountains, you will definitely be able to find what you're looking for here at Rocky Mountain National Park. That includes, of course, the Rockies. Big name mountains like Long's Peak crown the upper elevations within this park, but as you descend down from the alpine tundra, you'll first enter the park's subalpine zone, complete with its characteristic spruce fir forest, before eventually dropping into the montane zone, dominated largely by ponderosa pine. You'll find various meadows and alpine lakes here as well, complete with all manner of wildlife such as moose, elk, black bear, mountain goats, and a whole bunch more. Most people see this park via car, traveling along the monumental feat of engineering known as Trail Ridge Road, the highest paved highway in the United States, topping out at 12,183 feet. This road is unmaintained in the winter, which means each and every year, the Park Service road crews have to slowly but surely plow their way up and over the Continental Divide to open it up to car traffic each year. Sometimes this doesn't even happen until well into July. Fear not though, if you are not one for pleasure driving, this park is also a hiker's paradise. It is home to over 300 miles of hiking trails. From there, we'll head back out onto the Great Plains for the final time to a park that protects yet another dark moment in our nation's history. Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. On the morning of November 29, 1864, around 750 Arapaho and Cheyenne peoples were camped along the Big Sandy Creek in this part of Colorado. Led by Chiefs Black Kettle, White Antelope, Left Hand, and others, the tribes were camped here at the command of the U.S. military in the hopes that they could negotiate a peace with the United States and find safety and supplies at the nearby Fort Lyon. These negotiations came at a time when the Plains Indian tribes were greatly diminished after decades of conflict with Western settlers, American colonial expansion, and the loss of their traditional hunting grounds. On that morning, despite never having been ordered to leave Denver, the U.S. Colonel John Chivington led 2 regiments of the U.S. military to the outskirts of the camp. Over the course of about 8 hours, these American troops fired into the camp and killed around 230 Cheyenne and Arapaho, mostly women, children, and the elderly. The next day, those same troops then wandered through the massacre site and committed atrocities on the dead. To this day, the Sand Creek Massacre remains one of the most controversial events in U.S. history, and its significance is now preserved and interpreted as part of the National Historic Site, which bears its name so that we never forget what happened here. The site today is small, consisting of a visitor center and a small trail network which leads to a commemorative monument and repatriation site. Ranger programs are offered twice a day during the park's regular hours. And now, for Colorado's final MPS site, we head back to the desert southwestern portion of the state to Yucca House National Monument. This is another archaeological site associated with the ancestral Puebloan people, and it is very unique. For one, this site has more or less remained untouched since it was first protected back in 1919. And what I mean by that is, unlike a lot of these southwestern archaeological sites which have been excavated so people can study them, Yucca House has not. When you visit this site, you won't really see much of the characteristic stone buildings and structures you would typically associate with an ancestral Puebloan site, like you would at, say, nearby Mesa Verde. Instead, this site's archaeological riches are still buried beneath several clusters of mounds, with only the slightest hints that structures may be protruding from beneath them. Research indicates that the unexcavated structures here could contain potentially over 600 rooms and over 100 kivas. This site is also very small. It's only about 30 acres, and you have to traverse across private land in order to get to it. Apparently this has been some controversy around this, and there are no facilities on site. The Park Service offers a visitor guide that you can take with you for a self-guided tour, but I'm not sure if they're still offering tours here or not. They have tour dates listed for 2024 on their website, but nothing for 2025 as far as I can tell. And with all of the, shall we say, stuff going on, unfortunately, I'm not sure whether they have the staff to run tours this year or not, so that's still up in the air. Definitely check the website if you want to do something like that. But either way, the site is still open to the public. Just be sure to be respectful of the private property as you make your way there. This would make an excellent pairing with a visit to Mesa Verde National Park. And there you have it. Colorado, a mountain playground with the parks to back it up. 4 big 63 parks, a slew of monuments, and throw in a bit of history as well, both ancient and modern. You will certainly have no shortage of national parks to visit in the Centennial State. Let me know in the comments down below how many of these you've been to and which ones were your favorite. Direct support is always appreciated over on Patreon. I don't always make the most algorithm-friendly videos, but I very sincerely believe in what I'm doing here and how I'm telling these stories, and so I just rely a lot on fan funding to keep producing these educational videos for you guys in the way that I think they should be made. Any and all support over there is much appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.